because you are the heroes of this movement. You know? Phone calls, all right. But that's the beautiful thing about the recall, is that we now have a golden opportunity to change our state, to set our state on a new course. And it's not because of anything that politicians like me did. It's not because of anything that the state party did. It's because of what you did. You took matters into your own hands. You said enough is enough. You sat outside, you know, I don't know what the popular places were here. You got a Walmart? Hobby Lobby?
Bass Pro Shop.
Bass Pro Shop. And you offered a pen and paper to your neighbors and said, you know, we do not have to accept decline and failure as inevitable. California is worth fighting for. And it has been something that, you know, no one ever gave any shot, right? They told us we'd never qualify this recall for the ballot. Not only do we qualify it, we got more signatures than any petition drive in United States history. And I do think that when we're successful, it's going to send shockwaves across the country. That we're going to come out of this dark era of government control by lighting a new spark of liberty. And so, you know, I would just tell everyone, well, obviously make sure to vote. There are a few ways you can do it. You can send the ballot in, which of course you got in your mailbox, whether you asked for it or not. You can deliver it to a polling place. You can go and vote in person still. We still are allowed to do that on election day or when early voting begins. And then, you know, I've issued a Labor Day weekend challenge on Twitter yesterday to think about 10 friends, neighbors, co-workers, acquaintances, I don't know who else, your dentist, who you think might be inclined to support the recall, and send them a text or a DM or a Facebook message, or heck, you could even call them. I don't know if people do that anymore. Do we still make phone calls? And ask them to support the recall, because, you know, if people vote, what I'm seeing as I go throughout the state is that people want change. And so if that you know, if that takes the form of people handing in their ballots, if we actually get, you know, the sort of turnout that will reflect the desire for change on the part of the people of this state, then I think we will be successful on the 14th. So have I gone on long enough, SJ?
Yes.
Too long? Should we get into the questions?
We got some questions here.
All right.
So let's get started. And again, if you do think of a question during the event, you can have a note card and fill it out. We're going to ask some questions here from the basket. So let me see the first question we have gotten here. This question is, well, it's a three-part question, and the overall topic is...
Start with a three-part question. It's going to be a softball to begin with.
You guys do know that he was a national debate team champion, so I mean, we like to start with the hard topics. So the question is, will you have school choice? Will you dismantle school unions? And this questioner believes that masks should be banned from schools. The third part is not a question, just a comment. So I guess, could you talk to us a little bit about school choice and school unions?
Yes, I'm happy to, and I like the word dismantle. It's got a nice ring to it. Because it's true, that the dominance of the teachers' unions has been destroying public education in California. We have, you know, even before the COVID shutdown, we had way too many failing public schools. In fact, we ranked 49th out of 50 when it came to education in underserved communities. I actually used to teach high school in inner city LA. And it is because we have a education establishment that is run by a massive special interest that spends more on politics than anyone else by a lot, that has given more money to this governor than anyone else, and whose business model is to keep kids trapped in failing schools. And so that's what they want. That's what they do. And they run the Capitol, and they demand that our state's politicians reinforce that business model at every turn. So when I got to the legislature, I tried to fight for school choice. You know, for more charter schools, for choice even within the traditional public school system. And yet every attempt I've made, the teachers' unions and the rest of the education establishment has managed to stop. And things have only gotten worse under Gavin Newsom. Jerry Brown was a little more balanced on the issue, but with Newsom, you know, he was put in office by the CTA. They have, you know, underwritten his rise to power. And so once he got in the governor's seat, it was just open season. They just fully declared war on charter schools. The bills he signed were denounced by civil rights groups, like chapters of the NAACP and the Urban League. Then COVID starts, and of course we have the school shutdown. And so maybe this describes some folks here. A lot of people disenrolled their kids from their schools that had been shut down and didn't have any adequate even distance learning, and enrolled them in independent study-based charter schools that already had good independent study options, distance learning options. Yet what the legislature and Newsom then did is they immediately threw together this urgency measure to stop that from happening, to deny funding to schools that were getting new students. It was just unbelievable that this is what they would do, that this is what they thought the priority was, to make sure that families could not leave their failing neighborhood school that wasn't even open and wasn't even offering adequate distance learning. But that's what they decided to do. And then, of course, we had the longest school shutdown of any state in the country, 50th out of 50 in getting our kids back to school. And as the COVID era has catalyzed sort of a revolution in school choice throughout the country, California has seen just the opposite. We've seen a retrenchment. They even had a bill this year to try to just basically do away with the entire independent study-based charter school sector. And make no mistake that the goal of Gavin Newsom and his special interest allies is to end charter schools in California. They will not stop until they reach that goal. So I'm supporting a ballot initiative next year that will offer full school choice, so that the funding will follow the child. You can take your child. Yeah, we need to get behind this. You're the one paying taxes. It's your kid. You should be able to take your child and the money elsewhere. And as far as masks go, if we had school choice, then fine, maybe a school can have masks if they want. But you should have the option to go to a school that doesn't have masks. That's your right as a parent. And I would make sure that every parent has that option. And I think that, at this point, the evidence is sort of becoming clear that this is not the right thing for kids at all. You have the United Kingdom, for example, and other Western European countries. They said, look, we're not going to do masks for elementary school students. That the evidence is showing that the harms to the child's development far outweigh any benefits in stopping COVID, which haven't even been very clearly established, by the way. When you talk about the harm that a mask, there's a lot of stuff out there that shows what the harm that this does. It probably has a different effect on different kids, right? Some kids it probably affects a lot, maybe others not. That's why it should be in the hands of parents, not in the hands of the governor or any other level of government.
While we're on the topic of parents' rights, I'd just like to let all of you know that this coming Thursday, Don Dix of the Don Dix Show, AM 590, and our Riverside County GOP Central Committee Executive Director, and Mari Barkey of the Orange County Department of Education are going to be hosting Kevin Kiley this coming Thursday for a very special forum on parents' rights. So make sure you either follow me on Facebook, SJ Antonucci, follow Kevin, make sure you watch the events page, so that if you have very specific questions about what are your rights as a parent, you can tune in next Thursday to get those very specific questions answered from experts such as Mari Barkey, and Don Dix will be hosting it. So keep that in your planner. And let's get to our next question. Oh, that one was blank. Okay, let's try again.
I'm answering questions from the basket. You don't know what's going to pop up.
So, this question is about election integrity and the 2020 election, and this question has come up so often. We'd just like to know, what can people do to trust, the election process moving forward? And we get this question every time, so I'm glad that you guys asked it again.
Right, and there is a lot of distrust out there, and is it any wonder? We have a political class that is openly cheated in this recall, and I say that's a strong word, but it's true. When you look at what Gavin Newsom and the legislature have done, I'll give you one very clear example. The legislature had messed with the recall rules, so that's why we haven't voted yet. It should have happened a lot sooner, but a few years ago they tried to sabotage the recall process by making it take a lot longer. So that's why we were all thinking, well, it's going to be a November election. That's what the law said. It's going to happen in November. Then they decide a couple months ago, well, that might give Newsom time to mess a lot more things up. So, and this is, I'm not making this up. This is actually what they said, the main senator who was helping them with this. He said, if we have the election then the fire season might happen, might be issues with schools, so we should move it up a couple months. But the law didn't allow that. The law said, nope, it has to, the law that they had just created a few years ago said that no, it has to happen in November. So what did they do? They passed an urgency measure. Again, that's pretty rare to have a bill that takes effect immediately, that Newsom himself signed on the eve of the recall to move the date of the election to a date when he thought he would have the best chance of winning. None of this is speculation, this is literally what they said. And so I gave a speech against this on the floor of the Assembly, and I actually pointed to, sources like Jimmy Carter's foundation, whatever he calls it, that does international election monitoring, and like the United Nations. And one of the things these groups say is like the sign of a banana republic is when you have those in power changing the rules for an election while it is underway. Like, this is not the sort of thing that happens in respectable, like, modern democratic societies. But then I said, every child knows the word for changing the rules in the middle of the game. It's cheating. That's what it is. And so they cheat in plain sight, and then they wonder why people distrust the election process. So, I do think that the next governor needs to work to restore trust in the election process. And, there's a lot of other things that entails. Like if you remember the voting on your ballot for propositions and how they have messed with those so many times. The Attorney General is the one who writes the little descriptions, oh, the initiative will do this, the proposition will do that, and often it's like totally different than what it actually does. This is what they use to undermine the gas tax. I mean, that is literally the definition of election fraud. They are misleading you about the effect of what it is that you're voting on. I did a little breakdown. I looked up the definition of fraud in our civil law, and that is literally the definition. And you see so many things like this. I see they stack the deck in every way they can in order to favor those who are in power, and it's been worse than ever with this recall because the idea of a recall is absolutely is very frightening to our political class. Like, what's this? The people can actually have a say themselves? That we can't have that. They called it the California Coup. Did you hear about this? This was how they launched the anti-recall campaign. They did a press conference calling it the California Coup. It's an attempt to overturn a democratic election. One of the governor's allies started a PAC called Stop the Steal against the recall. They tried to get people to withdraw their signatures. You know how many they got? 42. 1.7 million, they got 42. There were more people who won the Newsom vaccine lottery than withdrew their recall signatures. So they have thrown every obstacle they possibly can in our path, and yet we have surmounted each one, every step of the way. And so we just have to keep going. And the one way you can assure your vote does not count is if you don't vote. So I think that to the extent that you have questions about what's going on, just use that as motivation to text and email and call 10 more people to make sure that they vote too.
That's right. And on the topic of election integrity, I'd like to tell you guys about two things that happen in the state of California. You may have heard about them. One is called ballot harvesting. One is called ballot curing. Not everyone knows what curing is, so I'll get to that one. So if you're not aware, California actually changed our election laws in 2016 and again in 2018. They made amendments to our election code that made us one of the most lax states in the entire country in terms of ballot harvesting. So what that means is that we have like the least strict laws in the whole country in terms of how can somebody go about collecting ballots for somebody that may not be able to get their ballot to the polling place. And what this is legalized cheating, because you're not really cheating whenever you change the law to do what it is that you want to accomplish. So I want people to go out and vote on September 14th if you can, and don't feel like you need to stay at home because the system is rigged and woe is me and the world is going to blow up, because this is why we don't win, when people are just staying home and not voting. And you can ballot harvest too. You can go collect the ballots from your neighbors, ballots from your friends, ballots from the people across the street that don't really vote, that aren't involved. You can take their ballot, you can follow the rules, you have to sign on the bottom who collected the ballot, and you are allowed to take that to the register of voters. Ballot curing is another thing that happens here in California with some of the most lax laws in the country. Ballot curing is when a ballot shows up to the registrar of voters and something's wrong with the ballot. They didn't sign it, something's not filled out right, it's crumpled up and it can't go through the machine that has to sort the paper in to count the votes, okay? When that ballot needs to be cured, basically, a new ballot needs to get filled out and fixed with how it's supposed to be fixed. But if there's, like, say, a signature missing, they need to go find that person at their house, have them sign a new ballot, and turn it back in. So in California, it is actually legal for teams of people to actually go knock on the doors of people and say, hey, Mr. Smith, I see that you didn't sign your ballot. Can I take a picture of your ID and have you sign this ballot? And then they go print out the picture of the ID that they took and return the ballot to the registrar of voters. This happens in every county here in the state. So these are the kinds of things that California has with such lax rules that other states do not have that allow, you know, strange things to happen in our elections. So I want you to know that it's not like we have just a terrible system and woe is me and everything is going to be bad, because that's the attitude that makes us not be able to win elections. So you need to go out and vote, and you need to get your neighbors to vote. And if your mom is in a senior care center, go collect all the ballots from the nursing home where mom is at. It's a good reason to go visit your mother or your father or your uncle. Seriously, bring them to the registrar of voters. So now you guys know about ballot harvesting and ballot curing, both legal here in the state of California. All right, I'm going to pull the pink card out. Let's see what the pink question is. Same thing. First question is, how do you feel about election integrity? Next question, what is your stance on critical race theory and plan of action for the curriculum here in schools? So a little bit of this you touched on, but you can give us some more.
Excuse me, I think that's my part. And my question was, how do you feel about the 2020 election?
2020 election. So. Yeah, so what I say when I'm asked about this, because the media always likes to bring this up, is on anything related to national politics, I say I'll let other people opine on that. I focus on state issues, and as I just outlined, I have grave concerns about a lot of things related to our election process here in California, so that's what I focus on. But as far as oh, by the way, a comment on what you just said, as far as the ballot harvesting goes. Last year, the state Republican Party decided, well, they've made this law for ballot harvesting, so they're using it. I guess we should try to, use it as well. And so they set up these drop boxes that would be used like outside of churches and places like that. Gavin Newsom comes out and says the Republican Party is trying to undermine democracy. It's nauseating. I can't believe they're doing this. This is illegal. And so he teams up with the Secretary of State and the Attorney General to try to shut down these drop boxes to deny people this opportunity to vote. And so it goes to court, and guess what? They were perfectly legal under the ballot harvesting laws. And so when they tell you that, oh yes, Gavin is just all about ballot access and giving more people the opportunity to vote, not true at all. They've actually reduced the number of in-person polling locations. So this has not been an expansion in voting opportunities. It's been a change in the methods for voting. And frankly, call me old-fashioned, I don't know, but I don't know what was ever so wrong with the system where we all voted at the same time, we presented an ID, and then we found out who won that night. What was ever so wrong with that? Critical race theory. So I actually gave the only speech on the floor of the Assembly against the bill on this, when it passed the Assembly a couple months ago. And this bill would not only allow critical race theory in our schools, it would require critical race theory to be taught in high school, every high school, as a graduation requirement in California. Now here's something that you may not know, because I was asked recently, do you agree with Gavin Newsom on anything? Do you think he's done anything right? That's a hard question, right? You really have to think about that. And then it occurred to me, there was one thing that he did right. He actually opposed CRT a couple years ago. When the first version of this curriculum came out, Newsom said it is offensive in so many ways, and it will never see the light of day. That's what Gavin Newsom said. And it wasn't just him, it was everyone. It was universally condemned, this first version of the CRT curriculum. The California Legislative Jewish Caucus said, and this is 12 Democrat legislators, that it echoes the propaganda of the Nazi regime. That's actually what they said. And so now fast forward 2 years later, and somehow if you are opposed to this, then you're what? Fill in the blank? Right? Even though Gavin Newsom and everyone else was opposed to it just 2 years ago. But my view is that we need to defeat this bill, but we also need to understand why it is that this CRT idea has even gotten a foothold in our schools. I think that's because we don't teach civics like we're supposed to anymore. We used to view civic as like the unifying thread of your education, that we're preparing young people for citizenship. We're teaching why it is America is the greatest country in the world, what has made our country so great, our Constitution, our founding principles, and that would equip you with the tools to, form your own identity, your own points of view, and to be an active participant in community life. But we don't think about, civics that way anymore. We certainly don't teach civics that way anymore. And so I see CRT as like exposing that vacuum, saying if we're no longer going to teach our kids how to build their communities up, we'll teach them how to tear their communities down. And I call it the anti-civics. And so I think that, yes, we need to defeat this CRT bill. I'm doing everything I can to defeat it, but we also need to, get back to teaching civics in our schools like we're supposed to.
All right, so the next question says, many parents are concerned about mandatory vaccines for K-R, I guess that means kindergarten. Are you willing to revisit or repeal SB 277?
Well, I voted against SB 277, and I would have voted against SB 276, but I wasn't in the legislature yet. I've spoken very strongly against both measures, which, undermined what ought to be something that sort of just is a given, and that's the right of parents to make these decisions for their kids, the basic rights to personal autonomy and privacy. So I would absolutely do what I could to roll those back. California is a national outlier when it comes to these things. I think we're one of only a few states that doesn't have a religious exemption, for example. And, a governor cannot reverse a law on his own or her own. Unfortunately, Gavin Newsom would probably say you can kind of do anything, according to Newsom. But I do think that kind of respecting the Constitution is one of the requirements of the job. You take an oath for it, when you get elected. I take an oath to do that when I'm elected to the legislature. Some seem to take that oath more seriously than others, as we have a habit in our legislature of passing laws that get struck down by the courts, including, do you remember the one last year where they tried to get Donald Trump off the ballot in California for not releasing his tax returns? And that was struck down unanimously by the California Supreme Court. But the lawyer, the law professor, he's actually the dean of Berkeley Law School, who supported that law, and Newsom pointed to, saying, it's okay, it's constitutional, he supports it. This same guy has been pushing this lawsuit to cancel the recall. Have you heard about this going on? They tried to file a lawsuit to cancel the recall, and in fact, it was filed by a lawyer who's been convicted of 19 felonies and sentenced to 3 years in prison. But rather than stay away from this, the Newsom camp has been, they've been sort of lending it legitimacy, but a judge laughed it out of court, an Obama-appointed judge, by the way. So just another example of how they are, trying to delegitimize this recall election every step of the way.
All right, so this questioner was very prepared and had their question typed up before they came.
Impressive.
So it says, I live in Norco, California, a rural charter city with 1/2 acre lots for animal keeping. You do know Norco. You had that wonderful book signing in Norco a couple months ago at the Water Wheel. Shout out to Norco. We love Norco. Norco is now being forced to comply with high-density housing mandate that will destroy our town. A developer and his attorney want to put 420 apartments and a hotel at 3rd and Hamner. The main laws we are dealing with is the Housing Accountability Act and SB 35. They have taken away our local control. So the question is, what is your position on the high-density housing mandate? Which, just for clarification, there are a couple of bills in the Assembly that are all sort of addressing high density in different ways from different directions. It's not just SB 35, there's a couple different ones, but that's the question. High-density housing mandates coming from Sacramento. This is a question we've been getting a lot.
Right. Well, this is sort of the only thing that the legislature and governor seem willing to do at all to address housing. This seems to just always be the solution, is let's, do more high-density housing. The fact is, there's a lot of other things that would be a lot more effective in solving the housing crisis. Right now, you have a median home price in California that's over $750,000. It's just crazy. It's gone up 20%, I believe, in just the last year. And so if you're someone who's like a young person, I see some younger people here today, maybe, or maybe you have kids who are in college right now, and they're thinking, they'd like to get a house after they graduate. Maybe they're doing well in school, maybe they'll get a good job that pays pretty well. And they get married, and they're looking to raise their family, and they want to have a home. It is really hard to buy a house. You might not be able to afford a down payment on your home until you're like in your 40s, even if you're doing pretty well. That's not the way it should be. That's kind of, the core of the American dream in a lot of ways, is being able to buy your own home and to raise your family there. And that is just disappearing in California. And it's the number one reason people are leaving the state, is the cost of living. We just had, for the first time in California history, our population declined last year by 182,000 people. By the way, Gavin Newsom has been denying this. I call him an exodus denialist. Seriously, they've been saying it's not happened, this is just people who like to hate on California. This is actually what they say. And so then we get the census comes in, and guess what? California loses a seat in Congress for the first time in history. So apparently the Census Bureau is in on it, on this myth, right? But then so this comes out, and they're like, well, okay, over the last 10 years, we did lose a seat in Congress, but our population still grew, it just didn't grow as fast as other states. So then we get the numbers for last year, and it turns out, no, the population did not grow, it declined under specifically Gavin Newsom's watch. So 170 years, California was always the state that everyone wanted to come to. It took Gavin Newsom to make it the state that everyone wants to leave behind. And so housing is a big part of that. And the solutions that I've pointed, there are plenty of places to build in this state, by the way, if you drive around. I've been spending quite a bit of time on the road lately, and there are plenty of places to build. What's the problem is we make it really, really difficult to do so. You can get a project off the ground in weeks and for thousands of dollars. In other states, that can take years and millions of dollars in California. The average cost to build before you even break ground is $150,000 just based on various costs and fees. The permitting process is an absolute nightmare. And so we need to simplify and reform all of that. Look at what has worked in other states to actually, get the housing stock to where supply meets demand, and we should do that.
So I'd like to share some unique perspective on this question as well. As many of you know, I own a mortgage and real estate brokerage based right here in Rancho Cucamonga. Shout out to Vadim, my broker, who set up this wonderful breakfast for everybody today. Still Group, bringing the food and the homes. And we have some crazy stuff in California when it comes to like homes and building and affordability and all of these topics. So first of all, I have a good friend who builds houses on a regular basis in LA County. And he said to me, oh my God, SJ, I don't know if I want to build any more houses in LA. They're going to start mandating that every new house I build has to have solar panels on it. Do you know how much that's going to increase the cost to build this home? It's going to make it harder to sell. People won't be able to afford it. And we have wild laws like this throughout the state in different counties that have these random mandates that are required building things that you have to do to be able to build your house. Not to mention we have weird zoning requirements, weird setback requirements. And I'm not talking about like setbacks so that the fire department can get in. I'm talking about setbacks that just don't even make any sense and laws that don't make any sense. So California's got a lot of issues that we need to address with housing that, Sacramento just doesn't address. They pass bills things like SB 10, it's for San Francisco to have a Soviet paradise with these giant skyscraper towers that they would really like to have. So they pass bills with that kind of stuff in mind, and they're not addressing, zoning problems, affordability. Permitting is so expensive in this state. And something else that you guys may not know, we have issues with our conforming loan limits in Riverside and San Bernardino County. The conventional conforming loan limit in this county is $548,250. That is the maximum loan you can take that can be sold on the secondary market to Fannie and Freddie. That means that if you can't buy a house that's up to $548,000, you can't get a loan for more than that unless you get a jumbo loan, which jumbo loans are hard to come by. You need an 800 credit score and a really good job, and there's not a lot of banks doing jumbos. So we have this problem that the maximum loan you can literally take in these two counties is $548,000. when you can't buy a house in Riverside or San Bernardino County for less than $600,000. And $600,000 might even be a fixer-upper in Rancho, okay? No lie. So then you have these federal loan limits that are set by like somebody sitting in the Fannie and Freddie office somewhere in DC who said, okay, in Riverside County we set this loan limit. So there's also issues that are affecting housing affordability that come from the feds too. That, I mean, California, I don't know. If somebody wants to pay me to go to DC and